Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Good afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on when you are tuning us in. This is Peter Robbins, your host, and this is Meanwhile Here on Earth. If you are watching or listening, you are doing so on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And if you want to subscribe, it is easy enough by going to their website, KGRA-DB. A subscription not only covers this show, but all of their other shows and every show that has ever been played and recorded here. You can do it on a monthly or a yearly basis. And if you use my name, PTER, Peter, you will get a 30% discount. As you know, sometimes I do monologues, other times I don't. And a brief one tonight. 3 days ago, we lost a legendary figure in the world of UFO studies and UFOs, and that was Betty Andreasson. Betty was a multiple UFO abductee and a very courageous one, whose accounts were brilliantly researched, investigated, and a series of books published on her by the great Raymond Fowler. The Andreasson Affair, the Andreasson Affair 2, and on from there are classics in the literature. Betty never shied away from controversy. She was tough, she was smart, and she was principled and made herself accessible to anyone that wanted to know more about this general subject and her experiences in general. My heart, and I know yours, all of those who knew her or knew of her, our condolences to her husband, Bob, 35 years. I hope he finds peace in the wonderful memories he has of their life together, and I only wish him well in the future. Betty Andreasson, we will miss you, and thank you for standing up and being counted when it mattered. Tonight, we have the return of one of my favorite guests, Stephen Bassett. Stephen G. Bassett is the first extraterrestrial life disclosure UFO lobbyist in the United States. He is also the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, aka PRG, founded in 1996 to end a government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. Steve has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, and I use that word with a capital D, the formal confirmation by heads of state of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He has given over 1,200 radio and television interviews, and PRG's advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media, and that includes features on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. Bassett has appeared on many documentaries, and his lectures and interviews are well represented on YouTube, where you can find them. In 2013, PRG organized a citizen hearing on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington. In November of 2014, PRG launched a two-year political initiative out of Washington that injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. PRG recently launched a new exopolitical podcast out of Washington, The Disclosure Wire, based in the National Press building, 2 blocks from the White House. Steve's involvement with ET political activism again began in 1996 when he worked as a volunteer for Harvard Medical School's Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer Professor John Mack and his program for extraordinary experience research. Bassett registered as a Washington, D.C.'s first ET lobbyist in 1999 and set up a political action committee, Extraterrestrial Phenomena Political Action Committee. In 2002, he ran as an independent for the United States Congress in Maryland's 8th Congressional District on a pro-ET disclosure platform, well ahead of his time and well ahead of the electorate, apparently. He only received 1% of the vote. Between 2004 and 2010, Paradigm Research Group produced 6 X conferences, as in exopolitical conferences, in the Washington, D.C. metro area. The first 5 were held at the Hilton Hotel in Gaithersburg, Maryland. The 6th conference was held at the National Press Club in Washington. In 2013, Bassett's PRG sponsored the April 29th to May 3rd Citizens Hearing on Disclosure, aforementioned. That was held also at the National Press Club. It's something I had the honor of being a part of, where expert witnesses gave sworn testimony to 5 former U.S. congresspersons and 1 former United States senator, alleging that facts regarding extraterrestrials were being suppressed. From November 5th, 2014 through December 31st, 2016, Paradigm Research Group conducted a political initiative targeting presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. The purpose of the initiative was to put media pressure on Secretary of State Clinton to publicly address her connection and her connection of her husband, former President Clinton, and her campaign manager, John Podesta, to the extraterrestrial presence issue. This connection goes back to the Rockefeller Initiative of 1993 to 96, wherein Lawrence Rockefeller engaged the Clinton administration to release all government-held UFO files and grant amnesty to witnesses who might come forward with relevant information. PRG's main website is paradigmresearchgroup.com. The Disclosure podcast, the Disclosure Wire podcast, is disclosurewire.org. And I need to correct, the main website is paradigmresearchgroup.org. Stephen Bassett, welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
You had to mention the vote percentage, didn't you, Peter?
It's their loss, Steve. And yes, I thought, is it possible? Yes, well, the citizens of Maryland hopefully will be growing with the subject as we move on in time. I
remember walking around the county putting up door hangers for hours and hours and hours. I got 1,700 votes. I sent them all a thank you card. It was an interesting time.
That's amazing.
I want to just mention one thing. The Disclosure Wire was attempted to launch about 2 years ago. It is being completely configured, and there'll be more news about that soon.
Excellent. We begin this program at a rather pregnant moment in history. And as such, aside from talking about, from your point of view, the state of disclosure and the worldwide disclosure movement, which is an extraordinary thing that you really began the ball rolling on and has taken on very much a life of its own in countries and cities and villages and towns around not just the United States, but around the world. However, as everybody knows, there is a war going on with the Russian government pressing very hard on the people of Ukraine. And we are getting incomplete information. We have no idea the numbers of people that have died, either defending the country or attacking the country. We have a humanitarian catastrophe in the making that, maybe with some irony, is getting a lot more news time I think, than, say, the catastrophes going on in Yemen or Eritrea or Afghanistan right now, because the individuals involved are overwhelmingly white Christian European people rather than people of color and other religions. You also, like me, come from a time where the idea of nuclear holocaust, nuclear war, is something we grew up understanding was a possibility. The nuclear clock, so to say, is allegorical, but we are very close to midnight. And you recently, in a PRG news release, wrote the following: "This is the devil we have been dancing with for 75 years. While the human race was denied the truth, it is not alone in the universe by an embargo led by the United States government. Let us hope that we will once more have a chance to stop the music." UN Secretary, and then you cite a number of subtopics. UN Secretary General warns, once unthinkable, nuclear war within the realm of possibility. Are we facing nuclear war? Would Putin use nuclear weapons? Ukraine conflict risks new U.S.-Russia arms race, world closer to nuclear war. Maria Baranova fears we're on the brink of a nuclear war after quitting Russian state-run media over Ukraine. Putin nuclear threat puts on escalation policy, part of new escalation policy. These bullet points are headlines. Am I correct, from various news stories?
Yeah, those are a few of many, many headlines in which the nuclear war issue is now being brought up on a regular basis.
Let's address this 1,000-pound elephant behind the brick wall before going on to anything else. I always thought, well, since I've been involved in this work, I thought it was ironic, and I believe coincidental on a certain level, that the so-called Cold War, by definition, began the summer of 1947 at literally the same historic moment as the modern age of UFOs. These two facts have been used by both of what we used to call the superpowers, America and then the Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union, to move the chess pieces around, create covers for different situations, create dodges of look over here, not over there. 75 years in, with the igniting of this conflict in Ukraine, what does Steve Bassett see as where we really stand politically, and if there is a way to draw a connection, how it impacts on the disclosure movement and the extraordinary progress we've had with the diminishing of the ridicule factor in this country since late 2017?
5 years ago, we entered a period of extraordinary political chaos. Certainly something I had not seen in my lifetime. And we griped about it. We bitched about it. We complained. And the God of chaos said, okay. And he passed the mantle to the God of plague. And so we got a pandemic, and we complained about that a lot, and griped and moaned and bitched. And the God of pandemic said, or God of plague said, okay, you want to be that way? And he passed the baton to the God of war. And so now we have that. It has been, to say the least, an interesting 5 years. I didn't, in my wildest dreams, expect that those three things would actually be a significant factor in the progress towards disclosure when I got into the field and started my work in early of 1996. But I was making a mistake. I studied physics in college, not history. And as it happens, One of the certainly most significant facts regarding issues regarding activism at the highest level, we'll call it long-form activism, is that it has to take place in the real world. And there's an excellent example for this. The civil rights movement, which is a pretty important movement, not just in the United States, there's been versions of this throughout the world, in which individuals were attempting to get the same rights and treatment, fairness, justice that others in their same society got. That really got underway after the Civil War, about 1870, 74, 5, somewhere in there, when Reconstruction broke down and things went south, literally. Right? So that essentially was, my Lord, we're talking 104, let's see, 75, 25, 47, 147 years, well, not 147 years, I'm sorry. That's essentially 90 years from the beginning of what I would call the real civil rights movement in America. Because prior to that, you had the abolition movement to end slavery. But once slavery is abolished, all right, you have a different matter altogether. That is the civil rights movement. And that did not get its core prize until 64, 65, the Civil Rights Acts. So 90 years, huge numbers of people worked in every way you can imagine to try to get those acts passed, to try to get justice for a segment of our population. That's a long time. Along the way, a lot of the people that were part of the movement were assassinated or died in other ways, or they were ruined financially. They were certainly attacked. Obviously, many, if not the majority, of all the people involved in that extraordinary movement did not live to see the Civil Rights Acts passed. But it gets worse, because during that 90 years, just among other things, you had World War I, you had World War II, you had the Korean War, Vietnam War, the Iraq War, and that's just wars that we were involved in. I think the Mexican-American War is in there somewhere as well. So they're involved in a major activist movement trying to get something very important for a large segment of the population. And meanwhile, history is just raining down upon them all of these huge, enormous obstacles, distractions. That's what history does. History just doesn't care about what you want or what your dreams are or what you need. History is the collective action of billions of people with billions of interests and organizations and power structures and countries and what have you. And it's moving forward under its own, I guess you could say, gravity. This movement is similar. The disclosure movement, as I like to call it, disclosure is the term with a capital D, and the prize is the confirmation from heads of state, which I helped to get rolling. I wasn't the only person, I assure you. It did start, I think, in 47. I think that's a very good starting point, which puts it 75 years in. 75 years is a long time, and things happen. And boy, have we seen a lot just in those 75 years. We obviously, the 47 happens just before the Korean War, which helped to escalate the tensions in the Cold War, which was sort of underway already. And then it wasn't too long after the Korean War was over that we're moving into another war that became the Vietnam War, which is a massive problem. And you know that the civil rights movement was operating during the Vietnam War very intensively. And you literally had people marching for, against the war one day, and then they're marching for civil rights the next day. And it's trying to get attention during this extraordinary time. And then as you move forward, some of the key people were assassinated. And then, again, the movement continues to try to move forward to get something from the government that the government doesn't want to yield up, which is the confirmation of the ET president. And we had the Iraq War, we had 9/11. And of course, the Cold War actually came back to life. I don't think it ever went away. I like to refer to the period from 1990 to now as Cold War II. I think it definitely now deserves that name. So it's tough. It is really, really tough to do long-form activism. You want to get involved in an activist project that's a little more local and you can get it done in like 6 months, maybe a year tops, okay? Like trying to get a stoplight on a particular intersection where kids are in danger. That's the activism that you don't have to deal with historical vicissitudes, but that's not the issue we're in. And it gets worse because the disclosure movement actually, and the issue embedded in it, interacts with directly and is entwined with some of these major things that are literally interfering with the ability to get the prize. And the prize is the President of the United States is going to go at the end of Cross Hall, behind that podium, which is where a lot of the stuff is done, though they sometimes do it elsewhere, and to a whole room in the East Room full of journalists. He's going to confirm that the results of the hearings that have been going on for weeks have finally confirmed or convinced him that the extraterrestrial presence is real. This is non-human technology and non-human entities. So what does the activist do? How does a movement react to these kinds of things? And in the case of this movement, here is why it's so complicated. One of the most important things that has prevented the confirmation of the ET presence is the massive security imposed upon it and the policy of embargo by the United States. That is tied into the ET issue itself in a number of ways. One is that the ET engagement of the human race escalates in 1947 after we dropped the bombs. And I think the United States was aware of that. The United States government became aware of the ET presence no later than 47 at Roswell when they got the crash vehicle, they got the bodies. So they may have had some hints or maybe even some significant confirmation prior to that. But let's just go with 47. So I think the government kind of knows that the ET activity is somehow connected to the nuclear age, the Cold War, which is awkward for them because they feel like they've got their hands full with dealing with the nuclear threat developing in the Soviet Union with missiles and so forth. And then soon China joins in. So they're having trouble dealing with that. They really don't need non-humans also at the party. All right. But for those in the government in 40s and in the 50s that weren't sure about this connection, that was pretty much settled in the mid-1960s, 1966, 1967, and going forward. What happened at that time? Well-established, confirmed by firsthand witnesses events took place in which UAP hovered directly over strategic missile sites, they call them flights, and simply turned the missiles off. Not one, not twice, but a number of times. And many of the witnesses that were there have come forward. They started coming forward many years ago, trying to tell us what happened. And so within the government, that pretty much solidified the point that if you're in the U.S. government and you have some understanding of this, then you clearly know of this very significant connection between this ET presence and our nuclear weapons, which we hold so dear, but we can't use, supposedly, because of the wonderful concept of mutual assured destruction. But boy, did it create a problem for the U.S. government. There are two things that I believe you could assign the principal basis for developing and maintaining a truth embargo for 75 years. If you're talking about the early days, the first 10, 15 years, there's a number of possibilities. But for 75 years, what are the reasons that they would really even attempt to embargo something like this from a public that is getting more astute, more technology, more aware? It's an extraordinarily difficult thing. What could do that? Well, amongst the people that are interested in this subject, there are many theories. One of the theories that you frequently hear is that the government is aware of something so awful that they simply cannot allow the confirmation of the ET presence, because then that would almost force their hand to then have to tell us this incredibly awful thing. So that's one possibility. A second possibility that you hear is that the ETs themselves are preventing the government from doing this. In other words, they've sort of put the word in to all the major powers, do not disclose, or we will do terrible things to you, something like that. And there's that. I don't buy either of those two. Right? They don't fit the facts. But there are two things that do fit the facts. And I would suggest that if you could bring together, off the record, the top 10 managers within the U.S. government and have a little chat about why they have supported, why they've continued to support the truth embargo and the CT issue so long, I think they would have two reasons. One, the connection between their presence and the nuclear weapons is an extraordinary problem for us, because there is nothing we can do about these ETs. Nothing. They can go where they want, do what they want, when they want, and where they want. And there's nothing we can do about that, which is awkward if you're trying to maintain authority and you're trying to maintain an orderly society. But then they have to say, and one of the things they do that we can't do anything about is they turn our nuclear weapons off frequently. And they even turn off the Soviet weapons frequently. And then it gets worse, because on occasion or two, at least once in the US, once in the Soviet Union, they didn't turn them off. They turned them on. They set them into launch sequence so that without the keys being turned, you know, the old key thing. And that, of course, created some acid indigestion on the part of all the people working at those sites while they watched the sequence moving toward launch. And, of course, once those missiles leave, that's the ball game. And then they stopped. Boy, talk about a college prank. That's right up there, okay? And so that is a really huge problem. And one of the reasons we know it's a huge problem is because a number of witnesses have come forward about various aspects of this phenomena. Over the years, you've had documents turn up, you've had books being written, and so forth. And sometimes the government will just sort of push it aside. There's various ways they can kind of counter it. But when it comes to the nuclear weapons tampering evidence, if you look at the history, and Bob Salas will be happy to give you that entire history anytime you like, what the government did was nothing, meaning nothing. Don't acknowledge it, don't respond to it, don't try to argue it or disagree with the witnesses or whatever, or undermine them, their character, just pretend they don't exist. Yep. We can't go there. We just can't go there. That's how much of a problem the nuclear connection was for the managers of the truth embargo. I'm empathetic. I really am. I'm empathetic. What are you going to say? So you just pretend the witnesses are not there. You hope the media won't go too far. The media has covered them some. They've given press conferences. The media reaction was tepid. The Congress has certainly not allowed them to testify in front of any hearings, even though this is about as good a national security matter as you could possibly come up with. So that's one. What's the other one? What's the other reason why the truth embargo has been maintained? And that is, I believe, because the government, the people that manage this issue know that once the hearings are held, once the military witnesses and the national security issues are well vetted in front of the public, that evidence, just on that, the kinds of things you've heard about, such as the Nimitz event and the Roosevelt event and the nuclear, of course, weapons tampering people will be there as well. Once that triggers the confirmation of the ET presence by the president, which it will, shortly after that, they're going to have to address contact. Does the government know about contact? Oh, of course it does. There are contactees in the government. Have they studied it? Of course they have. And they may even try to emulate it. I don't know. But the point is that they know contact is real, and that is a huge problem. Try to put yourself in their shoes. It's a week after the announcement by the president. New hearings are being called. Other aspects of the phenomenon are going to be addressed by various witnesses. How long do you think it's going to take for the countless number of researchers and podcasters and journalists that are now in this field to raise their hand and say, there's been an awful lot of books written by a lot of people that claim they have been in direct contact with ETs, not necessarily by invitation, and they've had a range of experience we like to call abduction and other things. You are going to call those witnesses, aren't you? That's going to happen. And they're going to have to do that. And they're going to have to say at some point to the American people, yes, we knew that there was coercive contact privately with American citizens and others, and contact that was not coercive. It might have been a mutual contact that might have not been physical, but rather in some way mental, psychic. And there's not a damn thing we could have done about it. Nothing. Boy, that is tough. See what I'm saying, Peter?
Yes.
That is the context that I'm trying to give you with respect to their problem in dealing with this issue, our problem in dealing with it in the historical process is underway, and you see how they connect.
Let me put forward a scenario for you, Steve, and let you comment on it. There is evidence, and some of it compelling, that this phenomena was making its presence known prior to the summer of 1947. I think the best documented, most solid incident is February of 1941, the Los Angeles UFO case, 80 days after Pearl Harbor. But things began in earnest in the summer of 1947. Harry Truman, a tough, no-nonsense everyman, who became vice president by a deal that President Roosevelt did not like. He never spoke to that vice president. He informed him of nothing. In fact, it was not until the afternoon of April 12, 1945, less than an hour or so after the president had died in Warm Springs, Georgia, that the president's scientific advisor, Vannevar Bush, informed the new president, Harry Truman, of a project that had been going on for some years to develop an atomic device, the Manhattan Project. And the war ends, and this happens. Well, the president, whether or not we take the literalness of MJ-12 directly to hand, pulls together some of the most knowledgeable insiders that he has and sets up what I'll term a study group. And I think if it had been left to Truman himself, being the tough, no-nonsense son of a bitch that he was, maybe it would have lasted 6 months, and then the president would have gone on the radio and the world would have changed. Can any of us even imagine what a different world we'd be living in if this announcement had been made, say, in the autumn of 1947? I think he was prevailed upon by those around him for a number of reasons to keep the study going, because we still had no idea what we were dealing with. We had just become, in many respects, the institution that many of us dream we still were. We had helped, in great part, make the world a place where democracy might flourish. We had defeated fascism. We had done something unheard of and spent billions of dollars helping our two primary enemies rebuild their constitutions, their basic sense of ethics, and their economies. And how much trouble and war have Japan and Germany started since 1945? None. I think this comes down to the men around Truman. And these were all men, mostly middle-aged, all white, of means, and certainly of power. Imagine being one of, say, a dozen or so men in the inner cabal of the inner cabal. You are now one of history's most extraordinary secret keepers. That's got to go to your ego to a certain degree. You are one of the men the president trusts to find out what's going on. And until we are able to come to the American people, and by extension the world, to tell what we feel is the truth, We have to make this priority. Our so-called national security state, wonderfully articulated in Richard Dolan's first 2 volumes, UFOs in the National Security State. Hopefully we'll be seeing volume 2 in the next year or so, did not begin with secrets around the atomic bomb or the development of atomic power. It began with the cover-up of the UFO situation, the flying saucer situation, if you will. And if one visualizes an oyster and a pearl and how a pearl forms, a piece of sand gets in there, it irritates the oyster, and it builds up a calcification. And the more calcification, the less painful. The result is something called a pearl. Real pearls are regularly shaped. We prize them for their beauty, their luster, whatever. That pearl, that monster calcified object, is at the dead center of our national security state. And I would pose that we're not really dealing so much with national security, and I don't mean to play with words here, but national insecurity, and the insecurity of the power brokers. Once this comes out, they lose a certain amount of cachet, to put it mildly. Their insider status is woefully spread out around the world. We will all be insiders. I think there is a reticence generation after generation to let that go. There is this culture of being one of those core secret keepers. These are the names often we don't know, or we don't know that it's them. Most of them are appointed, not elected. Some of the positions are literally inherited. Also, I think Truman could have gone forward on his own, but we live in a different world now. A president on his own or her own would be faced with much more challenges than they used to about doing this without consulting and networking with pretty much every world leader, leaders in the fields of economics, science, religion, philosophy, transportation, you name it. It's going to impact all areas of life, petrochemical industry. Plus, it would mean that whoever were to go up there, if it were possible, on one's own rather than coordinating it with world leaders going on television at a key timed, around the world. That president, this president, the next president, the past president, in saying, my fellow Americans, it's my solemn duty to let you know that since 1947, we have been aware, blah, blah, blah. That brings up another touchy situation, which is this inner circle, a very elite club of ex-presidents, former presidents, and the families of past and passed away presidents. It would mean directly that every single president of the United States, since and including Harry Truman, whatever their party affiliation, whatever they're leaning to the left or right, is an unindicted co-conspirator in the greatest cover-up and lie in human history. And at that level of the game, all of those differences drop away from members of that elite club. I don't think any president would want to be the one to make that assertion. Anyway, I'm going on here, but for me, again, that hearkening back to October of 1938 and Orson Welles' brilliant radio rendition of War of the Worlds, and how we see it creep up in documents, authentic, declassified, over the years that followed, fear of mass panic. How do you feel this plays into the modern world? Taking it from any place that I was rambling on about?
Well, you raised quite a few areas there, but let me take some issue with you. First of all, I've gone to some lengths over the years to try to make a very important point, that the truth embargo is not a cover-up. It's a legal policy of national security under the 1947 Act. So nobody was committing any crimes.
You're talking about the National Security Act of 1947.
1947. Yeah.
Yep.
So this was like the atom bomb work and a lot of other things. All of our nuclear weapons research, missile research is classified for national security reasons. So it's legal. Therefore, it's not a cover-up. Therefore, it's not criminal. It's a criminal act. This is a non-trivial distinction. So in terms of everyone that was involved in or knew about it are going to be, no, they're not going to be an indicted co-conspirator. They're going to be simply people that will have to, perhaps, if they're living and they're approached, they will have to give their reasons why they supported the national security policy, as opposed to, I don't know, coming forward and breaking ranks and violating maybe national security their non-disclosure agreements and so forth. They obviously did not do that, and they could be asked that. But that's quite a different thing. All right. Another point. The actions in the very early days of for instance, President Roosevelt, Truman, and so forth, these are not complicated. They're pretty straightforward. They were confronted with something extraordinary. The Battle of Los Angeles was hardly conclusive. I don't think that would have generated much awareness. The Foo Fighters may have if they had spent much time investigating that, but they were in the middle of a war at that time. I think for most of the government, the events at Roswell was pretty much the beginning, and that's what made it quite clear to quite a few people. A group was put together. I think it was called MJ-12. I'm very comfortable with that. And their job was to look at it, analyze it, and what have you. Now, fact is if the events in July of 1947 had gone differently, if the response had been much slower, we would have gotten disclosure in 47, not July 47, because quite a few reporters were on their way, and they'd been interviewing people, nurses at the hospital, direct witnesses. It would have been impossible to contain it. And that would have been it. But they just barely got a second press conference done, and they contained it. All right. Secondly, if we had not already begun the process of preparing for the next war, which is pretty much what humans do. As soon as they finish up one war, they start the process of preparing for the next war in various ways, some explicit, some implicit. For instance, if after the surrender of Europe, of Germany and Japan, we had aggressively approached the Soviet Union and said, look, fantastic job, guys. Really appreciate the sacrifices you made. 20 million troops plus 10 million or more civilians. Unbelievable. We have purged the world of the Axis powers and the Nazi scourge. So, look, going forward, you got your communist thing going. We got our capitalist thing going. All right, you do your thing. We'll do our thing. And we'll compare notes. See how it's working. All right? And let's cooperate in every way possible. If that had happened, and it could have happened, and there wasn't that immediate understanding that, that's the next enemy, that's the next war, and it's going to be nuclear, we'd have got disclosure very quickly. So that didn't happen either. See what I'm talking about? How the flow, the larger tides of history just carry individual possibilities and interests and desires and hopes and dreams along with them. And like a riptide, often what the activist has to do is swim with that riptide, not against it, because if you swim against it, you get exhausted and you drown. So you swim with it, with the tide of history. And if you get a chance, you just kind of angle out of it and get free and get something done. We've had to do that in a way. Right? The tide of history, certainly since 1990, has been brutal. And the activist movement has continued, but we've had to go with the flow, make adjustments. However, some other things happened, very historical in nature, that served this activist movement and will almost certainly help us get this prize. And let me talk about it this way. In 1996, when I entered this field to try to help resolve the issue of the ET presence by political means, since science wasn't going to work, because no matter how much proof you piled up, the government's going to say, we don't see it. I'm sorry, we don't get it. Thank you. Come back if you get something else, right? No, science was not the issue. The issue was a political decision, which they had made, and they weren't prepared to unmake it. 1996. Facebook was still 8 years in the future. Twitter was 10 years in the future. Google did not go online for 2 more years, 1998. So in 1996, when I came on board, there were only thousands of websites, and there was email, and there were bulletin boards, and that was it. All right. Now, as it happened, the websites in general just exploded exponentially. So as you're going forward in time, 97, 98, the number of websites is just growing like crazy. And then once Google came on, 98, 99, we started to get the word back that, my Lord, you can't imagine how many UFO websites there are. They're just huge numbers. And then we learned you can't imagine UFO is one of the most searched terms in all of Google. I'm going, well, that's good. That's cool. And I said, great. That's good. Something was clearly going on there, wasn't it? But guess what? Having a UFO website doesn't mean you can interact with people all over the world. No, you just got a website. Someone's got to find it. All right. And so if they Google it and they find it and they may get interested in it and they may then bookmark it or something. All right. That's not all that dynamic. However, they could find it and email a friend and say, hey, look, I just saw this site. You should check it out. Here's an URL. That's 1998, 1999, 2000. Okay. And we're moving forward. And we're taking advantage of this extraordinary, unprecedented technological achievement. Right? We're not talking this isn't like the combustion engine. This is way bigger than that. And we used it. And I made a website. Probably everybody I know had a website. It was a really crude website, I'll tell you. And I upgraded it, but many years later. Point is, I had a website and I sent people there. But then something else started happening. Right? Because there was radio. And that was another way people could learn about this subject. They could listen to some radio shows. And there were a few, not a lot. But again, that's spreading the word. Okay. And then somebody came up with the idea of internet broadcasting, which started out slow, but eventually became broadcast.com. And that not only allowed you to broadcast over the internet, but it also allowed you to archive other actual radio shows, which is what Art Bell did. So now people could talk about the issue on radio, and then it would be archived, and they could go back and look at it and refer it and spread it. And so that increased the, how would you say, connectivity, the presence of the UAP issue. But then in 2004, Facebook showed up, and then Twitter showed up, and things changed big time. Because now, not just web pages, Facebook pages that you could share instantly, and messaging, which you could simply contact somebody all over the world through your Facebook. And then Twitter shows up. And so the UFO arena starts to fill up these spaces. Huge presence on Facebook. Huge presence. It starts to develop a huge presence, and that's evolving. But this is an interconnective, dynamic reality in which everybody engaged in this issue can connect with people all over the world on this issue, back and forth. They can argue, they can debate, they can insult each other, whatever. But the UAP issue, the ET reality, is now globally dynamic. And that's great. We took advantage of that, and we continue to move forward, which is to say, that the work of the activists and the researchers combined with these technological developments was putting more and more pressure on the truth embargo. Yeah. And then the piece de resistance, podcasts show up. Because not only was internet technology increasing and improving, so were camera technologies and microphone technologies. Better, cheaper, available to all. And before you know it, it seemed like the whole world went into the broadcasting business. And you got podcasts that can be viewed or listened to from people all over the world. All they need to do is have the URL, which gives huge numbers of people the ability now to go and give you their opinion, not in a text message, not in an email, but here I am in my office, and you interview me, or I'm giving my thoughts. Then they're interviewing other people, and the dynamic really starts to spread and grow fast. Until not too long ago, one relatively successful podcaster with 30 million viewers gets $200 million for going behind a paywall at Spotify. That's how powerful it was. And that's not the end of this. And so this dynamic, which has now entrenched the UAP issue in all of this technology forever, worldwide, is now become like the background radiation that they discovered many years ago, that remnants of the Big Bang, which is everywhere you look. There's this background radiation. They were able to use that and calculate what they thought was when our universe began. Well, guess what? That's how the UAP issue now. It's everywhere. It's background radiation. What does that mean? It means that this idea that somebody in the DOD is going to come up with a clever maneuver and they're going to push everything back in a box, or the politicians are going to revolt and say this is ridiculous, or anything like happened in 1969 that is not going to happen. We are headed towards disclosure. Nothing can stop. A nuclear war could stop it. I admit a nuclear war could interrupt disclosure, but frankly, after the war is over, I imagine a couple of surviving heads of state would go, "Hey, what the hell? What does it matter anymore? ETs are here; they've always been here, and we surely wish they had stopped that war, but they didn't." So, this idea that we're going to go backwards is not going to happen, and this interacting global communicative dynamic is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, unless we launch EMT devices all over the world and blow all the circuits out and go back to the Stone Age, which is another topic we could discuss. So we've won some and we've lost some, but ultimately we win. All right. This technology makes it absolutely impossible for the government to continue to maintain this. Now, recently, a little kerfuffle developed because Christopher Mellon and Luis Elizondo interpreted some developments over at the DOD, where apparently they kind of muttering about saying, look, any of these things that are going to come out of these reports that the recent acts called for will be classified. I'm still not sure about that, but they're already getting, if it's true, they're already getting a lot of blowback. That's not going to sell, right? It's not going to happen. They can try, but it's not going to happen. Because the entire internet world, the podcast world, is going to descend on them like a plague of locusts and drive them crazy until they come before the horde and go, "Oh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. We don't really want to classify that stuff. We'll give you the reports as requested." That's where we are now. 75 years in, we're on the cusp of disclosure, and yet, do I think it's going to happen tomorrow? No. Why? Because the latest historical development is war in Europe. And it's a big deal. It is extremely dangerous. You raised a good point before. Putin has made a number of mistakes here. He's in fact made a blunder of historic proportions, which is the kind of blunder you generally just never survive, meaning that when you make a blunder like this as an autocrat, you're deposed. And that's ultimately where this heading, unless something dramatic happens, right? But how can I put this? One of the mistakes he made, amongst many, is that he created a massive refugee crisis of white people with blue-eyed and blonde hair. Big mistake. There have been similar crises. Syria and Aleppo comes to mind. 7 million in that area were displaced, but they were of the wrong color. And our media just didn't quite hang in there, right? I understand the world is what it is, right? The world is what it is. It's wrong, and the media even knows it. But that's just the facts of life. It's like, okay, we've covered it for a while. It's time to move on. Not this time. If they could, they would interview every single mother that has been forced to leave the Ukraine at the border and their kids. And every story will be told, not only at the border, but they're telling them in the cities themselves. Right, wrong, I don't know, but I do know this. It is a massive blunder among others, that this gentleman who could have been an extraordinary figure in history, who could have made Russia, which, by the way, is the largest land country in the world, comprising 1/8 of the land mass of the planet.
And 10 time zones, not 3 like America.
Exactly. He could have done the things to make Russia more than just the largest grain producer in the world. And by the way, that's going to be a problem, particularly given
Ukraine is
the second largest.
Yeah.
So there's that. He could have made it into a miracle story, very much like China.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. He went a different way. And as a result, his legacy will be nothing but a bucket of ashes.
And that is where we're going to hold for the first half of the show. This is Peter Robbins with my special guest and dear friend, Stephen Bassett. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Stick with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
And I'm back. Peter Robbins, Meanwhile Here on Earth, guest Stephen Bassett. Steve, 2 questions for you to start. Number one, few people in the work have maintained such a rock-steady attitude, work ethic, sense of direction, or had a more positive spin, spin's the wrong word, a more positive attitude about what they are involved in doing, namely working toward a full disclosure acknowledged by the government, moving forward, in a sense, with the government. I have heard people say, he's just too much of an optimist. He's not realistic. he's got to get with the program and realize that they're just never going to let it go. Is that stuff that's just behind your back, or do people actually say that to you occasionally, and how do you deal with it? Number two.
Oh, yeah, I've told that many times.
Number two.
Am I a cockeyed
Actually,
optimist?
I'll hold number two and address that first question.
Yeah, a foolish optimist. A friend of mine, good friend of mine, recently said, well, maybe you're strategically hopeful. And I love that phrase.
Great phrase.
Immediately, I was going to steal that. This is the last time I'm going to give him credit. But Joe, sorry, but what can I say? It's too good a phrase. Got to be mine. Look, it's really not complicated. If you want to be an activist, you don't have to be. If you want to be an activist, and you're seeking a change, you're seeking something. It's always from authority. Generally, an activism is always about authority. You're trying to get the government to do something, federal government, state government, the city government, whatever. And sometimes you're trying to get nations literally to do things together. If you're going to be an activist, then you have to, one, define why the hell you're doing it, why the hell anybody should care, why they should get involved, why they should fund it and support it. Which means you have to explain where you're going, and I call that the prize. You have to explain what is the prize of this activism. When the women were seeking the right to vote, they started the suffrage movement. It was really very simple. They wanted an amendment that gave them the right to vote. It wasn't complicated, right? Real simple. And that's what they wanted. And they went and they got it, okay? Now, there was a lot of other things women at that time needed, but they defined that goal and they got it. Every activist movement has to have a prize. We didn't have that. When I got into the field in 96, it was basically years and years and years of trying to come up with enough evidence and people would finally say, you proved it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, as ET's here. And the government wasn't going to support it, wasn't going to agree. The academic world had been shut out because the truth embargo was very effective with the academic. Bless their hearts, I'm the most courageous people in the world. Journalists sort of understood they had to kind of keep a certain distance. And so it was prove it and prove it and prove it over and over again. I'm going, wait a minute, it's not about proof. It's about a political decision to embargo. Let's end that. Okay, fine. So the movement starts to develop. But again, what's the prize? Where are you going? Okay, you want the government to change their policy, but how does that work? Well, in the civil rights movement, it was simple. They have to pass certain laws guaranteeing not only your civil rights, but also the right to vote and so forth, which apparently wasn't really present in our society up until 64, 65. What's the prize for this movement? It is, of course, disclosure, the confirmation of ET presence. Because once you get that, the doors open up to the rest of the phenomena. Everything that the private researchers have done, the government has done, that we can pry out of the government, okay, post-disclosure and so forth, recognition, acknowledgement, vindication, people can come out of the closet with respect to events, maybe even contact and so forth. Without that, no. And although it'll be taught at the universities massively, now there's a course here and a course there. Some college does a course, people go, oh, wow, look at that. I'm going, oh, please. It should be taught in every university in the country, period. Not only the phenomena, but exopolitics. Haven't gotten there yet. So the prize is disclosure. Okay, now, fine. And then the question is, okay, how hard is it going to be? Don't know. How long is it going to take? I don't know. Well, but what's our circumstance? Well, we don't know for sure. However, it's looking promising here. This is developments happening there. We're anticipating this. Here's the latest, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, fine. But do you think any activist movement can be led by people who on a regular basis go in front of them and say, you know, I probably will never live to see, well, that's really kind of uncool because Martin Luther King made a very special speech. Let me put it this way. You go in front of people and say, look, I have no idea this is going to happen. It looks really terrible. I'm thinking of retiring at any moment. I don't know. Maybe you should reconsider. Do you really think that you can lead an activist movement that way? No way. You have got to constantly give people a sense that they can get this done. You have to err on the side of confidence, err on the side of optimism. but at least provide bases for your optimism. There have been times in the last 26 years when I have pretty much said in various ways, man, we're screwed for a while. This is not good. All right. And I even kind of stepped out of I just kind of retreated at some point. I don't go into details because things have really gone to hell. But most of the time, I'm trying to explain why we will win. We will succeed on this. Now, those who are not those who aren't activists, they don't think that way, and that's not what they're doing in life. I can understand why they go, oh man, you keep saying it's going to happen, but it's okay. It's all right. To lead is to keep moving forward, to give people some reasons and basis for them to move forward. And not everybody has to get to a particular place. You only need a percentage of a society in any activist movement to arrive at the same place at the same time, and it flips. All right. Okay. And so when somebody's not ready to go, my attitude, that's okay. That's all right. I'm not upset. Right? You think I'm too optimistic? That's okay. You pretty much had all you can take and you want to go live in the woods? No problem. Okay. But again, that explains, I'm trying to give you a sense of why I am that way. It is not because I'm not rational or that I'm obsessed, but rather this is an activist movement. And if you're an activist, that's what you got to do.
You, while you were speaking, you flashed me back about 15 years to a very memorable for me, certainly, conversation you and I had, one of our first real eye-to-eye discussions. It was backstage at the EXO political conference in Liverpool, England. And you were kind of picking my brain a bit about the late 1960s and the anti-war movement coming out of Vietnam, which I was certainly a part of as an art student in New York City at the time. And what the point was how can we make that happen? And I said, I don't think we can, and explained my thinking. What happened there was there were people that were for the war, people that were against the war. But as more and more young men were drafted into the military and more credible information was coming up showing us that this was a wrong war, that we had been lied to, that we were supporting a corrupt regime, that we were bombing innocent countries, etc., more and more young people turned out in the streets because they felt it was the right thing to do. They were driven by a passion and a sense of right and wrong. And the numbers started to grow. And at a certain point, a key figure in American media culture, we don't really have anybody like this now because there's nobody we trust and respect as much as a television personality, and that was Walter Cronkite. And we had a couple of people at that level of the game back then. John Chancellor, Eric Sevareid, Murrow earlier. But Cronkite came out against the war. And it was Johnson who basically said, if Walter Cronkite isn't for it, this is the beginning of the end. What happened then was many of our parents followed us into the movement. And that's when the arithmetic growth became geometric. And it wasn't 1, 2, 7, 8, 9. It was 2, 4, 16, 32, 64. And then it was hundreds of thousands of people, then Daniel Ellsberg, et cetera. Do you think there's a chance in this day and age when the media is so suspect, when we are all conditioned as cynics to know that anything can be faked, certainly visually, that there could be a potential for, say, a Pentagon Papers leak with Daniel Ellsberg, or one of my favorite what ifs, thinking about photos I have seen or scans of pictures that have convinced me over the decades that there is stuff going on the moon that is jaw-dropping. Mars a little farther away, but the moon stuff's going on there and has gone on there. That if a battery of photographs that were gilt-edged somehow, and I'm just grabbing a straw here, that they broke out and were certified by the scientific establishment. Do you see any kind of widget or MacGuffin, as Hitchcock used to refer to that plot point thing, that could trigger that acceleration toward disclosure?
Theoretically, yes, there have been some things that have come out. But this is a different situation. Well, it's different in one way and the same in another. The Vietnam War was a catastrophe. It was evil. It was war, right? But unfortunately, we were part of it. And I think we were on the wrong side in a sense. I think both sides had their issues.
I'm going to do something here and interrupt you mid-sentence just to point of clarification. I agree with everything you've said, but I knew young men, and now I know older men, who didn't do what I did. They felt it was their responsibility. They believed what they were told. They served their country as honorably as they could in what they felt was an honorable cause. And in no way do I want any listener or viewer to think that in any way we are demeaning these individuals.
Oh, of course not. No, I've talked about this many times. The Vietnam War was awful. I'm not talking about the men that went to fight. I'm talking about the politicians that sent them to fight.
Yep.
Right. Not the men. No. And I'm on record on this many times. But I'm glad that you clarified that. But the war was a disaster, and it was awful, and there were lies. And so consequently, Ellsberg made a very dramatic move and came forward with the Pentagon Papers. The truth embargo is a mistake, and it has significantly affected the 20th century. But I'm not going to put it in the same box as the Vietnam War. And so the idea that there would be a Daniel Ellsberg, I don't think so. I think that inside government, those who are inclined to have us get the truth on this don't see the decision in the same way that certainly Ellsberg saw things. This is a national security matter, huge implications. The policy was originated for national security reasons. It's probably gone on a bit too long. There hasn't been a lot of bloodshed. It may have been a little bit, but not much. And in complex ways, it may have affected human history in ways that ultimately we viewed as negative. But no, we're not. This is not a good comparison. All right. Now, there have been some leaks in this issue, though. Microfiche, a couple of documents will turn up. There have been some witnesses that have come forward. But this idea that somebody at a high level just comes forward with a massive amount of evidence and creates an impossible situation, and the President of the United States is forced to disclose, I can't rule it out, but it's a mistake. We don't want that. Disclosure is actually a very positive thing. It's not a negative thing. And it has enormous implications, and it needs to be done right. The way you end a war and the way you end a truth embargo like this are not quite the same thing. We need to end this embargo in a responsible way, minimal damage, minimal disruption, a lot of participation, a lot of transparency, which is why we need to have hearings for witnesses. We need the cameras to be turned on. We need the world to watch and so forth, and establish a comfortable platform for the president to make the announcement. We could have had that decades ago. We just didn't do it. Because it's taken so long doesn't mean that we need to be irresponsible about how this finally goes down. And if you listen and watch Elizondo and Mellon in their presentations in those mostly Elizondo now, or Mellon's op-eds that he writes, the work that they've done with respect to the Congress, witnesses gathering and all that, their whole raison d'etre is in fact a responsible conclusion to this truth embargo, and that means hearings and then leading to a statement from the president. The problem is that they can't say anything. They have to stay within certain boundaries in order for this to work. You've got to get the politicians involved. You've got to get committee chairs involved. You can't go to them with the most extreme aspects of this phenomena. You've got to go with them with a fundamental platform is politically safe. What is that?
That's right.
National security.
Sure.
You need witnesses that are safe. Those witnesses, military witnesses, who are taking double oaths to be there. And they have done that. They created the full platform a couple of years ago. We could have had the hearings a couple of years ago, but history intervened. Okay, history intervened. I assumed that the political chaos of the last administration would significantly ebb if there was a new administration. And it turned out that there was going to be a new administration. And so, okay, good. But before that could be taken advantage of, the worst pandemic in human history showed up. I mean, who ordered that? I didn't see it on the menu. I mean, come on, right? Give me a break. And now what do you do? How can you really advance this issue? Remember the early days of COVID? I mean, my God. And then it surged and it comes back down, and we sort of I tried to get involved in some things and was making progress, and the third one hit. And then before we could really react to that, the big one hit, the Omicron wave. It's like the waves on a beach. You miss the first one, you miss the second one, the third one kind of, and then finally you're ready, and that wave comes in. It's like 80 feet high. So the ability to get this done correctly was essentially went aground on the reef of the pandemic. And then finally, we're seeing the potential for it to finally go endemic. I'm paying very close attention, always have been, to the science of this and what's happening. And it looked favorable. And we've seen some very positive results. And then you have war. So can you go to the Congress now and say, look, we realize there's kind of a problem, a crisis in Europe, and there's a lot of nuclear talk going around and some threats of using nuclear weapons and so forth. But look, could you take a moment? Let's get some witnesses in here and hold a hearing on the extraterrestrial issue. No, not going to happen. All right. So we will press on. As I say, the web presence, the internet and media presence of the ET issue is now absolutely ingrained. It's not going away, I assure you. And any attempt to pull a fast one is not going to work, but we have to deal with the crisis. But to get back to something you said, one other thing I want to mention. I was involved in the anti-war movement a little bit. I certainly lived through it. And when the war finally came to an end, I asked myself a simple question. Did all of the marches and all of the speeches, all of the anti-war effort, which was huge, involving very large numbers of people and organizations, did it shorten the world war a single day? And I could not convince myself of that. It seemed to me that war lasted as long as it was going to last and ended when it was going to end, and we did not shorten a day. And that's kind of depressing, all right? But then I thought something else. I said, yeah, ending war is not easy, particularly when your government is committed as we were, and when you've got that much blood in the water. But all of that effort, all of that information, all of the speeches, all of the books, all of the movies and documentaries was a massive education of the public about war gone bad, about what is happening. And that education could very well pay off down the line, right? Okay, now, let me go and transfer it to our issue. If disclosure happens later this year, if we get through this crisis in Europe and things settle down and we get the hearings, the witnesses come forward and we get disclosure, say October. The day after, I'll be celebrating, but I'll be asking myself the same question. Did all of this effort, going all the way back to 47, with Heineck, Rubin, NICAP, KUFOR, MUFON, APRA, all the researchers, and then the activists, did it shorten the truth embargo a single day? And I'm not sure I could convince myself of that. But even though that may be the case, the amount of education that was given to the world by the researchers and the journalists and the activists and the filmmakers, decade after decade, prepared them for that day, prepared them for disclosure, prepared them to deal with it once it comes, to provide perspective. that's worth something too. And so none of this will be in vain, I assure you. So that's my response to that, something you said earlier.
Let me turn a small corner here and take us into another facet of the diamond. There are two forces at play behind the scenes, behind the expressions, that inform a lot of us civilians and a lot of people in government and a lot of people in private life. We have probably more than most people are comfortable with, especially if this is a subject that you are consider yourself an outsider on, or this show is a bit of a novelty for you, who have had actual, authentic UFO-related, truly anomalous UFO-related experiences, contact experiences, abductions, which will inform your thinking and your behavior for the rest of your life. Some of them are highly placed in the military. Some of them are elected officials in the House and the Senate. Some of them are local officials. Some of them are bureaucrats. And this is something, it's a very personal thing. Many of them don't share these things, but it is going to impact on their decision-making and on the way they handle themselves. Then in a more traditional way, America is a country that embraces a wide variety of, well, we're America. At our best, we are representative of people from everywhere in the world who have come here and made an agreement, in a sense, to live together and to try to create a better life for themselves and each other by indirection, following the precepts of Republican democracy, who are people of devout faith, people with a background growing up in religious families but are not really practicing now, and agnostics and atheists. Among our friends and colleagues and associates of people of faith are people who take their religious teachings very literally. And among them, there are a percentage who find this whole idea of aliens from space or interdimensionals or events that could have been misinterpreted a few thousand years ago, perfectly understandable now, of, gee, was it a drone or was it, an opening in a wormhole where an intelligence from another dimension came through, or a hard metal machine from parts unknown under intelligent control, coming and going with impunity, that this is a problem for them, a real problem for them, and that their votes, their public decisions, their attitudes, their opinions will affect it. We have these two things going on just below the surface. Do you ever think of that as a factor in terms of disclosure or in resistance to disclosure?
There are many things that various people are dealing with in their life that makes them resistive to the the idea of an extraterrestrial presence or the idea of disclosure. That's unavoidable. But I remind all that the disclosure event, which will start most likely with one country. There's no way you can gather countries together to do this because the whole thing would leak out in the first week and a half. We'll start with one country. It'll spread worldwide in days, certainly weeks, which every major country of any consequence, or any major country, the head of state is going to confirm it. And most of the developed countries have their own evidence anyway. It is a global event. It is a macroscopic global event. It's the most profound event in human history. Now, there are 7.9 billion people on this planet right now. They speak 3,000 plus languages. There are thousands of religions. And in a way, every single one of them has their own worldview, though worldviews tend to gather together, and I get that. But you could say that just like every person is unique in appearance, every person has a unique worldview. So the issue isn't whether some individuals of this persuasion are going to be uncomfortable or this religion are going to be uncomfortable. this is an event of such magnitude that it transcends religion, politics, economics, personal biases. It is history of the highest order. Remember, I talked about how an activist movement, which could be historical, is constantly dealing with the massive tides of history. Well, let's turn this around. Whatever's going on in the world, okay, whatever this group is planning on doing, that nation's planning on doing, disclosure is going to impact them, right? And a lot of them, it may be somewhat of a negative. For instance, I think a lot of oil and gas people are going to go, I didn't need that, and so forth. So, I mean, I don't want to pick on them, but I'm just saying that this is a massive historical event that will affect other people in the ways that other historical events have affected this activist movement, right? And so I think we should take some responsibility for that, in the sense that, look, disclosure is going to happen. It's going to be huge. It's going to affect every aspect of human society in one way or another. Let's respect that in the post-disclosure world. Let's be understanding. Let's be reasonable. Let's be open. Let's be what's the word? Sympathetic, empathetic. As historical events go, I give it a much higher rating than, say, World War II. All right. Definitely gets a higher rating than a nuclear war. In other words, those are also massive global events. This one I see is hugely positive. There are negatives, but it's hard to imagine any event in human history that will have the potential for positive outcomes than this one. It's not only just positive. Let's go back to the very beginning of our show here. We're talking about what's happening in Europe and the saber rattling and the nuclear weapons talk and all of that. This gets down to me, the reason I do what I do. As I've said a few times, I'm an anti-war activist disguised as a disclosure activist. All right. In other words, an anti-war activist by other means. And that's not a simple thing. It's not a trivial thing. All right. I grew up with the bomb. I was born in 1946. I was conceived in early 1946. Hell, you could almost hit the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima with a 9-iron. Okay. And so it's followed me all the way through my life. I watched the Cuban Missile Crisis. I hid under my desk. Been living with it my whole life. Everybody that is younger than 75 or younger, has lived with this their whole life. We've seen movie upon movie upon movie of the apocalyptic post-nuclear world. Mad Max 2, Mad Max 3, Mad Max Fury, whatever the hell. And then, of course, all of The Walking Dead, all 5,000 of those shows basically are representing a nuclear aftermath. You've got On the Beach, and you've got Failsafe and Doctor Strange, and on and on and on. But these movies did very well.
They did.
And the reason they did very well, because they were tapping into an absolute fundamental aspect of the human subconscious right now, which is we created an end-worlding weapon finally, right. And by God, we might just use it. And so why do I care whether I go to college? Why do I care if I have any money? Why do I care about anything? It's all going to end tomorrow. That's not a good vibe to try to live a productive life. And that's what we've lived with for 75 years. Okay, fine. And so there are people out there that are in the anti-nuke movement, the nuclear anti-proliferation movement. They're not having a great deal of success. We were able to get from 85,000 nukes down to 13,000. Turns out we only need about 1,000 to pretty much end the world. But hey, it's progress. So things are not going well in that area. In fact, in the last 10, 20 years, it's gone terrible, right? It's almost as if we forgot about it. Nukes, what can you do, right? Boys will be boys. We're finding out what boys can be, all right? And so here we are in a situation where at any time, a movement toward DEFCON 1 could take place. And it's worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis because the Cuban Missile Crisis was simple. It was checkers. Russia, Soviet Union wants to put nukes in Cuba. Not going to happen. Where are they? They're on a boat. Okay, how long will it take to get here? About 4 or 5 days. All right, we got a plan. Let's come up with an idea. All right, blockade, whatever. And they did this, they did that. It was over in 13 days. This is 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional chess. There's more countries. There's as many countries involved in this situation as there were in World War I. Guns of August, right? There's so many different things that could happen that could escalate this, right? There was a fellow was interviewed on Real Time with Bill Maher. His name escapes me. He's a well-known nuclear physicist scientist, and he was talking aggressively about the issue of the risk of nuclear war. And he reminded us of something I was reminding people of 20 years ago. We didn't account for all the nuclear weapons. We didn't account for all the nuclear material at the end of the Cold War, right? We really don't know what's out there. We don't say that a lot because nobody wants to hear that, but it's the truth. And I was impressed that this guy said it at this time, meaning there are nukes, we don't know where they are. Right? There's nuclear material, we don't know where. In other words, even the unknown unknowns. There's probably material we never knew existed. And so the possibility of it turning up could happen in any day. We need to be incredibly vigilant and not invade any countries, but we have. And so, okay, that's the situation. But then, okay, keep in mind that one of the most important things, as I said, in this issue is the nuclear weapons tampering. The ETs have been sending us a message. That's what the witnesses believe. That's what I believe. It's not, we can turn your weapons off. Ha, ha, ha. No. Or, yes, be afraid of us. We are capable of turning your weapons off. We are the gods of nuclear. No, that's not what they're doing. They're sending a message. Why in the hell do you have these things? Do you intend to use them on yourself? You're not going to use them on us. Please don't spend trillions of dollars on these friggin' weapons because you're going to use them on us. That's funny. We laugh at that. We can turn them off like that. All right? So there's this message. But have they fully intervened? Have they forced disclosure? No. Have they stopped any other wars? No. And so it's not clear what their complex relationship is with our trajectory in this. Some people believe they'll turn them all off if we launch them. We launch several hundred. That's what would happen. Several hundred will be launched almost immediately if there's a nuclear war. They just fly in, turn them all off, turn them into hunks of metal, and they just fall into the ocean. They could do that, maybe, hopefully. Would they? We don't know. We don't know that. And so, what's going on here? Well, my theory is pretty straightforward. They have a plan. They could destroy the whole planet. That would solve the problem, but that would be kind of nasty. They could force disclosure, which would be very disruptive, but then it would lead to a discussion. Or they can help advance the disclosure process so that we do it, we disclose, we acknowledge, we then educate ourselves, and then they can go into open contact with us. Because that would be not so disruptive. It would be appropriate. It would be responsible, like disclosure has to be. And then they can have a discussion, and I think I know what that discussion is. Okay. You've acknowledged we're here. We got a lot of cool technology. But one of the reasons we've been so intensely engaged the last 75 years is because we know you're going to have starships pretty soon, right? We follow in your physics probably closer than you are. And you're probably thinking you're going to build those starships and put some of those nukes on and fly out in the galaxy. And that's not going to happen. We would be insane to let you put nukes on a starship and fly out into the galaxy. We've seen your record. We've seen your report card. And so what's the point of this? The point is this. If you want to come play with us, you got to get rid of the nukes, all of the nukes. All right? If you don't want to, fine. If you want to blow yourself up, fine, but understand, you're never leaving the planet in a ship that can go star to star with those nukes. In other words, I have felt for 20 years that disclosure is the solution to what seems an utterly unsolvable problem. How in the world can this planet and these nations actually get rid of their nuclear war weapons before they use them based upon everything we know? I don't see how it's even remotely possible. I just don't. I don't think there's a chance in hell we can pull that off. However, as they use in the European theaters of the 12th and 13th century, the Deus Ex Machina, the ETs become the Deus Ex Machina, the God in the machine. We've been following you for a long time. We know what you're doing. It's a stupid thing. It's fixable, but we got to talk. But first you got to disclose, then we talk. And so it's conceivable. And I'm happy to go in front of our audience at Harvard and talk about this. Only Harvard right now is only in the business of looking for ET stuff out there in space. That's as far as they've gotten in 75 years, right? But, at least they're doing something.
Exactly, under leadership of Avi Loeb.
Here's my point. I believe that disclosure leads to open contact, and open contact leads to the ultimate problem we have, not global warming. That ain't it, okay? I'm sorry, right? People are worked up about that. I get it, but who cares what the sea level is post 1,000 nuclear weapon targets, okay? Who gives a damn what the sea level is? Post-disclosure leads to open contact. Open contact leads to the basis by which we finally get rid of these weapons. That is what is the point of this. And so when I see Vladimir Putin decide to go down in history, right, the way that he's chosen, a man who's old, probably ill, he's worth billions of dollars, but you can't spend it in heaven, which apparently he thinks he's going to go to. He's an Orthodox Christian. Putting us at nuclear risk right now, it's a little frustrating because we came so close on several occasions to maybe getting this done. But in history, pushed it forward and pushed it forward again and again and again, and pandemics and political chaos. And now we're faced with this. And it's a little irritating. It's like being in a 75-year marathon, right? And you're almost to the finish line, and somebody jumps out of the crowd and shoot you in the butt with a shotgun. It's a little frustrating, and you just fall down. You don't cross the line. So let me not overstate this. That is what's involved here. It has always been involved here. There is a huge, vast array of issues and concepts and technology and even extraordinary things connected to the ET reality. I get it. Right? Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, whatever the hell. I get it's okay. And one day we should learn about that. But first, we have to prevent ourselves from blowing the planet up. You see, because nothing else matters after that. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm getting more intense about it. I'm not too bad tonight, but about, a week ago, I gave an interview, and I pretty much went full crazy. I hope that doesn't get around much, but I hope people can appreciate why I'm kind of intense here. Okay. I've talked to the nuclear weapons tampering witnesses. I've read the books. I've seen the documentary. I know that has happened. The New York Times hasn't quite gone there yet, but they've gone pretty far. They need to keep going.
Yes, they have.
Right. And so I'm just going to keep pushing that and pushing that and pushing that. I'm trying to, I put an op-ed in the New York Times. They declined. I'm going to go to the Washington Post next, and then I'll go to the Hill. I'll go to Washington Times. I have a perspective as an activist that's not out there. And I'm hoping some people will pick up on it soon. All right. And it's not because I have an ego and I feel I'm being neglected. It's just that, let me ask you, Peter, who else is talking about this in this way? Who is making those connections? Not too many people.
No. And I'm going to jump in for a moment with two thoughts somewhat related. As you're aware, in the 1950s, the very notable pioneer in psychology, Carl Jung, wrote a book called Flying Saucers. The subtitle, I believe, was Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky. And being young, he used it as an opportunity to state two parallel views. That in the follow-up of the carnage of World War I and the insanity of World War II, that existential notion, God is dead, we need a new pantheon of modern, high technological gods to save us from ourselves. And I think there are people out there, well-meaning, good people who, looking at the wonderful X-Files poster and the mantra, I want to believe, who very much want to believe that even though they haven't shown their hand, publicly revealed themselves, that ultimately, if we are closing in on a terrible nuclear potential holocaust, they will step in and they will disarm it or give us that warning that will make us do it, a la the day the earth stood still. I don't really take that seriously. I wanted to know, though, if you had, if this had come up for you like it did for me at the beginning of the pandemic, and let me set the scene here briefly. As we moved into February, I had one pending speaking job out of town in Knoxville, Tennessee, in fact. And I flew there on a Friday, I spoke on a Saturday, and I returned on a Sunday. It was the Monday, I think, that the president declared the national emergency, and everything began to change around us almost immediately. I have a sister who's a registered nurse practitioner who had, for weeks, had been very involved in conferencing and networking with health professionals around the region, the state, the country, et cetera, keeping very sharp on updates on everything that was theoretically coming down at us. And I finished my talk, and the conference supposed to have 250 people. Thankfully, only 30 showed up. None of them were taking any precautions. Myself and another person, they were the only two who were wearing masks irregularly or gloves or using hand sanitizer or social distancing. It just wasn't resonating. Anyway, I step outside on Saturday, give my sister a call after. She said, I knew you were going, but if you had told me or you reminded me yesterday, I would have asked you not to go. Why? She said, I know you think of me as a school nurse sometimes, but this is what I've been doing. And was the first person to say to me something nobody was thinking about at the time. Let me give you an idea of what may be coming at us over the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And here we are 2 years in, and it's happening as she very much stated. The next day, on Sunday, I'm flying back to New York State. I've got a layover at Dulles International, as you know, Steve. You come and go from there or have, it's a busy airport. It's a hugely busy international airport. And Sunday's a busy travel day. For 5 hours, I saw maybe 24 people. Most of them worked there. It was surreal. And as I was having my nicely prepared snacks in Ziploc bags, after washing and boiling my hands, I started to laugh. And I thought, I flew out here on Friday the 13th, and I'm flying back on the Ides of March. Usually things tap you on the shoulder with one of those. I get home, and that Monday morning, I started to shop for food to make food with, like Rummel's quartermaster about to invade Egypt. Wednesday afternoon, I come back, my pantry's full. I close the door. It's the 18th. A few days ago was the second anniversary. And I start to think, here I am, very fortunate. I have a home. It's in the countryside. I'm well stocked. I have a network of people here. If this gets really bad, at least I have a shot at coming through it. And then a thought occurred to me that really caught me completely off guard, which was when disclosure happens, and it's undeniable, and the airwaves are full of it, and unless you're in some cave on top of a mountain in Tibet, you know about it in one way or another. There'll be a moment when we can all say, oh my God, I'm sitting here thinking about something, as sure as I can be that 98, 99% of the rest of the people in the world are thinking the same thought, give or take parameters, at the same moment. And it was revelation to me. I thought this is the closest we have ever come in my lifetime to a moment, a time when we're all in it together. Whatever's going to happen here, there's no denying it. It's the thing that's taking up all the oxygen in the room at the moment. And savor this experience and remember it, because it may come back at you in a completely different way. End of thought.
Here's how I say that, because I actually talk about that, but in a different way. Disclosure is an event of such magnitude that will affect everybody. Will learn about it very fast because of the modern world, right? Wouldn't have been the case in 1890 or 3000 BC. And it's going to be it's going to get everybody's attention. And there's going to be a period of time when all of the people in the world are basically looking at the same thing, meaning disclosure, and they're thinking about the same thing. And during that period of time, what you've got is 7.9 billion pairs of eyes. Obviously, we don't include the infants, but you know what I'm saying. Looking in the same direction. That just doesn't happen, right? But it will happen. And therefore, it is during that extraordinary period where if you can put something in front of them, all 7.9 billion pairs of eyes, and say, look, this is something we need to do. In other words, a lecture, right? Just imagine you're giving a lecture and you got 7.9 billion people in the audience. Now, obviously, you definitely want to be good. The point is that that's how that opens a door for change of a magnitude that we're simply not unable to contemplate right now. It's beyond anything remotely has ever happened. How much can we present to the world when the world is all looking in the same direction now? And some people are going to take advantage of that and go, perhaps, and go, wow, everybody's looking the same direction. Let me get up on the stage and sell them a bill of goods. Let me sell them some real estate in the Antarctic or whatever the hell. But I think we've got enough, how would you say, ability now to interact and so forth, that I think that's not going to happen much. I think people that make that attempt are going to find it goes very badly for them. So the era of reform, the era of change may begin at that point, and we may see a reformist era in human history unlike anything we've ever seen. And we may fix a lot of things. Again, one of the things we have to fix is the nuclear weapons thing. Period. We just have to, fix that. It's like a family that lives in a home and there's a 5,000-pound bomb unexploded in the basement, and they've just learned to live with it. Can go off at any time. But what can you do, right? It's like we close the door to the basement. We never go down there. That would be kind of stupid, wouldn't it? Well, that's exactly what And so we're on the same page, Peter. We need something that gets the attention of everybody at the same time, in a way. And also, it's not just anything, like a giant, say, 100-mile wide meteor coming in. Obviously, that would get people's attention. I'm talking about something that has profound implications that are very positive. We need something like that. And this is it. There isn't anything else, right, even remotely capable of that. There's 7.9 billion people on this planet at a time when if even one of those 7.9 billion people get their hands on a tactical nuke, and for whatever the reason, just because they're just having a bad day, decide to drive it to the center of Washington, D.C. and set it off. Just one of the 7.9. And people say, well, who would do that? Hey, talk to people that have been at a theater or a restaurant when somebody came in with a gun with high volume ammunition or high capacity ammunition and ask them what people are capable of doing. This is an asymmetric situation that has got to be fixed, and fixed soon. And so, again, it comes down to the same thing. Can we think big enough? Can we do what is necessary to finish this activist movement? What more can we do? We're doing a hell of a lot, right? And I'm not dissatisfied. I mean, there's so many positives out there. I'm following all the news, and I know what most people are doing. And again, if it wasn't for a pandemic and this war in Europe, I think we'd have probably been there. I think we'd have had it probably a year and a half ago. All right. But it is what it is. Am I worried that we'll lose track? No. And I've told you why. The UAP issue now is virtually in the background radiation. It's everywhere. It'll never go away. So it's just a matter of tidying up, trying to avoid a calamity here, get to a place where we can finally end this truth embargo. And let me make this and put it this way. Let's say that some sort of detente is reached in the Ukraine, in which, I don't know, there's a truce, and some of the troops are pulled back, cities are destroyed, and people are thought, well, at least we'll stop killing each other, and then maybe we can talk a little bit later. And it's still a mess. It's awful. It's still a tragedy, but it's kind of, it just kind of cools down for a while. And in that interlude, a president of a major nation, possibly ours, based on some hearings that were held and a lot of scores of witnesses coming forward, is able to finally confirm the ET presence. And now the whole world knows we're not alone in the universe. There's multiple ET civilizations that are engaging us, even perhaps in the ancient past. We have a galaxy in front of us. And then somebody raises their hand and says, when are we going to reignite the war in Europe again? You know, we've been kind of standing down for almost 3 or 4 months. We need to start the artillery. Let's get going. Let's start killing people again. And I believe people are going to say, what in the hell are you talking about? Are you serious? Really? Were you paying attention here? Now, this sounds kind of silly, but it's not. We may very well have an interlude in this war. We actually have to have, because if it keeps escalating, somebody's going to do something stupid. And if we have that interlude, we could have those hearings. We could get disclosure. This is not silly. This is actually a very realistic possibility.
Well, another realistic possibility, which doesn't seem possible, is we have had a missing time experience, Steve, and you have 90 seconds left to sum up before I go into our closing.
ParadigmResearchGroup.org. I have some announcements hopefully coming a little later this year about my work, which is, I think, going to be helpful. All I can say, folks, is hope for the best, plan for the worst, and never give up the prize. The prize is disclosure. Don't be discouraged. It can happen. It will happen. Let's get it done.
I think there's a chance that window may open a little wider in about 4 months. When we hit that point at the end of June, the beginning of July, that marks the exact moment that the 75th anniversary of Roswell, Kenneth Arnold, the modern age of UFOs begins, and America and the Western world indeed will be hit by a barrage of UFO-related media information that we have not seen since 1997 and the 50th anniversary. And that may be something that serves the purpose of getting the truth out more. The audience will magnify and expand tremendously. Conferences are about to re-begin. There will be extra documentaries, podcasts, live events. Some of you will take part in them. Other than that, Steve, will you join us about that time? Sometime in the summer, we can come back and pick up where we're leaving off today.
Of course. 75 years after Roswell, we're still celebrating in Roswell with a festival. That should tell people something.
Yes, indeed. I'd like you all to know that next week's guest is one I have been looking forward to for the entire time I've been broadcasting this show. You're probably not aware of him, but you certainly will be, and he will be coming and going from this show in the future as well. Gus Russo, R-U-S-S-O, is one of America's leading scholars on the Kennedy assassination, worked as Oliver Stone's direct information man in the making of JFK, not on the plot, but on details of how things were in Dallas in 1963. Gus literally infiltrated an aspect of the mob to write one of the great organized crime true stories I have ever read. One of the great espionage researchers who wrote a book called Best of Enemies about a high-ranking CIA and KGB official who became the best of friends. He's also one of the greatest storytellers I know, a dear friend, and yes, he has had a UFO experience. So next week we return with Gus Russo. This is Peter Robbins and my very special guest, Steve Bassett, asking you to stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and be kind to each other. And we'll see you next week.